Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. When we come back, the latest on Joe and Justin.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
Yes, please ring that bell, as Sasha the cat always demonstrated. And please like us, give us the thumbs up. When you do so, we beat the YouTube censorship. Be surprised. I was looking at the numbers of a lot of prominent, small c conservative broadcasters, and they're a lot less than some people who are doing shows out of their basement who have never done journalism before. And it's because YouTube suppresses people who bring serious arguments against the liberal regime. And that's part of it. I love fighting back, and I love it that you folks are fighting back with me. So I'm not here to complain about other people's broadcasts, but I'm here to complain about how YouTube does not have an equal playing field. It is not balanced. They deliberately suppress some people and allow others, huge numbers, because they see them as part of their game plan. It's one thing I've learned in the last year and a half of doing this. It's quite interesting. So what's happening with Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden? It's quite interesting because, as you know, let's focus on Trudeau here for a minute because he's always fun. We had this Liberal MP sent out an email to the whole caucus, Wayne Long, and some people responded to it. And we're going to hear a quick interview with Ken McDonald before we get
federal
going
politics
with Ken
again.
Before we get going with Ken, let me remind you or refresh your memory. There's Ken with his eyes closed. Ken is a Newfoundland MP, Liberal, who voted with the Conservative opposition to axe the carbon tax because he felt a lot of Atlantic Canadian Liberal MPs were going to lose their seats if the carbon tax stayed for the next election. So, of course, what was the result of that? Well, Ken got his way to some extent because Trudeau decided to axe the tax only in Atlantic Canada. That's what it amounted to. Yes, I know it was just on basically kerosene, home heating oil. And of course, it's not just Atlantic Canada was affected, but that's where I heat my home with natural gas. What about me? No, because you live in the West. You live in Alberta, Saskatchewan, maybe BC. No, won't affect you. So Ken decided to vote against his own government. But famously or infamously, what the next non-confidence motion that was raised by the Conservatives, Ken McDonald voted with the government and decided to give the Conservative opposition the finger. And I did a show on that. And I was watching question period that day very closely. And this happened immediately after question period. They had the non-confidence vote. And Ken McDonald, well, I won't do it, gave the Conservative opposition the finger. So let's hear what Ken is saying. Ken is the latest MP to suggest it might be time for Justin to go. Why is he saying this? Well, for one reason, he's not running in the next election. So let's
talk about federal politics again. When Wayne Long sent his email to the caucus on Friday, you were the very first MP to reply all. You said, well said, with an exclamation point. Does that mean you agree with Wayne Long that the Liberals need a new leader?
It means that I agree there has to be a conversation. When it comes to who the leader is, whether it's Justin Trudeau or somebody else, I've said many times before that If the Prime Minister decides to leave, that's his decision to make. But I do think it is badly needed to try and calm the waters, I guess, to a certain effect, is that we need to have an in-person caucus and allow people to speak frankly. That election in Toronto St. Paul's, I think, is a sounding board that is telling us that, listen, your day is here. And if things don't change, you're not going to go no further.
So where do you think the majority of caucus is? I mean, you've said in the past you thought the Prime Minister and this government may have hit their best before date. This was a year ago you said this. Where do you think the majority of caucus is right now in the wake of what happened in Toronto St. Paul's?
I think there's a lot of caucus members who are nervous. Do I think a large number still stand with the Prime Minister? Yes, I do. And but I think having a in-person caucus meeting would allow everybody to speak their mind and with no repercussions, because the conversations might be somewhat difficult at times. But and in the past, the Prime Minister has always been there to listen to individuals or as a group. And we've had several meetings as with Atlantic Caucus and even with Newfoundland Caucus. We've had discussions with him, some difficult discussions and some pretty cordial ones.
Yeah, I don't know how many cordial ones you have with this Prime Minister, especially if you're a woman, because Justin Trudeau does not like taking any grief or opposition from women. And this is despite the fact he's a feminist. Oh, yes, he says he's a feminist member of parliament, a feminist prime minister, and he really understands women. Well, there's a lot of talk right now about the former governor of the Bank of Canada, Mark Carney, very well-known liberal, very well-known globalist. He was interviewed at the last Davos convention with the World Economic Forum. And of course, he tried to put a reasonable face on things, and he actually talked to some conservative press just to show you he's really not that bad a guy. He's actually quite understandable. But there's talk about Trudeau bringing in Mark Carney as finance minister. Now, you say, oh, we already have a finance minister who's also the deputy prime minister. So that would be Chrystia Freeland, the one with the grandfather who was a Nazi propagandist. Yeah, that's the one. But Trudeau might want to have Mark Carney closer to home, somewhere where he can keep an eye on him. And essentially the top cabinet position, finance always is in Canada. So that would be a solution. And of course, in the process, he could throw Chrystia Freeland under the bus. Now, I've no sympathy for Chrystia Freeland. I find her demented at times. I find her hectoring, annoying, loud, obnoxious, frivolous, absolutely insanely petty. But Justin Trudeau will never walk away from throwing a woman cabinet minister under the bus. You remember Jody Wilson-Raybould? Yes, the Attorney General, the Justice Minister, who really objected to the way Justin Trudeau interfered in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. This was where Trudeau deliberately inserted himself. I'm being careful with my words here because there were never any charges laid by the RCMP. I wonder why. But Trudeau, of course, inserted himself into the SNC-Lavalin scandal by suggesting that SNC-Lavalin was very important to Quebec and the Quebec votes, so that there better not be any judicial consequences for SNC-Lavalin because we don't want to rock the boat. We want to keep SNC-Lavalin happy because they're a big employer in Quebec, and we need Quebec votes to keep coming in as a given. So Jody Wilson-Raybould, of course, if you recall, really objected to that. She was gone under the bus. So can Chrystia Freeland be another casualty of that? Well, of course. Nothing ever stops Justin Trudeau from treating people abominably. And there was another female MP from Southern Ontario who was also black, who said that when she told Justin Trudeau she didn't want to run again in the last election, she was just absolutely humiliated by Trudeau. And he browbeat her, and he stormed out of the room, and he told her that was unacceptable. But of course, that's the kind of hypocrisy we expect from Justin, isn't it? So, what is Justin saying about the demand? Of course, is that they need a caucus meeting now, not in late August or early September, because things are bad. Because the Liberal Party's on the skids. 68% in an Ipsos poll, which I haven't got a slide of, but I just read this morning. Ipsos poll, 68% of Canadians say it's time for Justin Trudeau to go. 70% of the country say the country's broken. Those are not very reassuring numbers for Justin Trudeau. Of course, he thinks it's all going to pass, but reality is sinking in. Reality is sinking in. So while Trudeau goes to Markham last weekend, and he's dancing up a storm, must have thought he was back in India, trying some of the local dances. Looking, of course, like a totally self-obsessed, narcissistic man who doesn't believe there's a problem out there that's not surmountable. He really believes this is all small stuff, and he doesn't really have to worry about it. And he'll just be prime minister because who else can do the job when Justin Trudeau is there? But Justin Trudeau is saying no. He's talking to MPs individually. This is the story of the hour. That Justin Trudeau has been doing the Lyndon Johnson thing. Oh, Lyndon Johnson, President Lyndon Johnson, one of the great advocates of picking up the phone and calling congressmen, congresswomen, and senators and telling them, you can trust me. And what is it you really want? How can I satisfy you? So Justin Trudeau has apparently been on the phone individually with MPs. How many MPs? Now, I find it hard to believe one of the laziest men ever to occupy the office of Prime Minister Canada is talking to that many MPs. What do you bet he's talking to Toronto area MPs, maybe the 905 area code outside of Toronto, and maybe just a select few, because I can't for a moment believe that Justin Trudeau would actually be calling that many MPs. He doesn't ever think a crisis is a crisis. And of course, he's not going to have a whole caucus meeting. That would be an admission that he's done something wrong. And he won't do that. He won't do that. So what's happening with Joe Biden? Okay, we'll get to that one in a minute. This is the latest from The Guardian, which is so left-leaning, it's incredible. But Joe Biden, of course, it continues to be under the gun by Democrats, some of them sitting Congress people, most of them donors, most of them backroom bosses, party bosses who say, hey, Biden, it's time to go. And of course, there was a report in the New York Times saying that Biden is actually weighing whether or not he should stay in the race or drop out of the race. Now, of course, the Guardian has a story here. White House says report Biden is weighing whether to stay in race. Absolutely false. And this just came out like an hour ago. This just came out an hour ago. So do you think it's absolutely false? I don't think so. I think we know who's controlling the White House. Now, some people think it's the chief of staff, who nobody can ever remember his name. Some people think it's the Secretary of State or the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. And yeah, I'm going to, of course, Secretary of State Tony Blinken. Is it Tony Blinken? Is it Jake Sullivan? No, it's someone named Jill Biden. who apparently just can't imagine life without Joe Biden as president and life without her being first lady and living the life of power politics in the White House. That's who wants this to continue. That's who keeps foisting this poor old bugger out in front of the crowds and looking like a fool, humiliating her husband because she wants the power. Now, I don't for a minute excuse Joe Biden because his ego is enormous. It's on the scale of Justin Trudeau. And reality must be sinking in, even with Joe Biden's dementia in play. I don't know how much reality he can still comprehend. I don't know how much of the news he actually understands. I don't know how much of the opposition and the anger and the resistance to him he is even cognizant of. But he must know there's something wrong, and it's about him running for president. I think he understands that much. He does have moments of mental acuity where he seems to understand that. So I'm betting Joe Biden knows there's a problem, but his ego says, I can do it. Just keep on making those stupid public appearances where I don't know where I am. I can't get off the stage. I don't know who's in the audience. And I think people who are dead are in the audience, but I'll keep it up because who else can do the job except Joe Biden? So I love the latest he's come up with. And this is something only Joe Biden would suggest. Jet lag. Oh, you say he was what? He was on a foreign trip just prior to last Thursday's debate, which is a week ago tomorrow, by the way. It's quite interesting. No, he's talking about the G7 summit in June. He's talking about events that happened 3 and 4 weeks before the debate. Nobody has jet lag that persists for a month. And of course, his first excuse was, I had a bad cold. I had a sore throat. Now it's jet lag. I mean, this is absolutely pathetic. To come up with an excuse like that, to make it even more ridiculous. Biden had scheduled naps during the debate prep, which went on for 5 to 7 days. We're aware of that. And then of course, he's still got the audacity to suggest it was jet lag, even though we knew he was wrenched out of the White House for about a week and crammed with information, probably stuffed with drugs, and certainly was jabbed again just before he went on the stage last Thursday night. And everybody in the Democratic Party hoped for the best. But, of course, it was a disaster, as Viva Frei put it in our interview, an abject disaster. And everything has continued to go wrong for Joe Biden since then. Of course, he really objected to the Supreme Court decision that grants President Trump or any president partial immunity from so-called crimes committed while they're in office, especially when they're not crimes. Donald Trump had nothing to do with any insurrection. There was no insurrection on January 6th, 2021. There was no insurrection. Nobody had a single weapon. There was no real threat to police or the massive American military. Yes, there were incidents of violence, but it was not indicative of the whole event. And as we know, these protesters were invited into the White House, the Capitol building, by security. And we know the FBI had dozens of plants So they continue, and Biden continues to pretend this was some kind of horrible insurrection on January 6th, and Donald Trump should pay the cost for this. Donald Trump told people to go home, and he told them to go protest peacefully. He did not tell them to try to take out what? He still was the government on January 6th. That's how ridiculous this is. I don't know if anyone has ever actually enunciated that. Donald Trump was still president on January 6th. So how could he invoke or support an insurrection against his own government? It has never made any sense. It's always been a setup. And Joe Biden continues to parrot these talking points because he thinks people are so stupid they don't get it, that they're not going to realize this had nothing to do with any kind of insurrection. So we'll probably break a little earlier than normal. I'm hoping to have Neil Oliver on tomorrow to talk about the election results in the United Kingdom. This election will probably annihilate the Conservative Party. But guess what? There's a uniparty system in Great Britain, just like there is in the US, and sometimes it looks that way in Canada. The Labour Party is probably going to win tomorrow's election. But the Labour Party looks just like the Conservative Party. It has the same policies. It believes in the same things. It supports and advocates exactly the same kind of politics. Now, the Reform Party, shades of what used to exist in Canada, will probably come in a strong second. That will be the interesting news. Not that the British voters exchanged one establishment uniparty for another, but that there is some real small c conservative populist resistance to globalism in the UK. And that's what we need to know. And by the way, Chrystia Freeland, we talked about her earlier. She continues to have a seat on the World Economic Forum while she's Finance Minister of Canada. Is that a conflict of interest? Of course it is. Does she plan to resign that seat? No. And she won't. She sees no problem. She sees no conflict. She sees no contradiction. That's because all she ever understands is what the Liberal Party puts in front of her to read as a script. And that's what Chrystia Freeland's all about. So thanks for watching today, folks. I'll be back again tomorrow. Like I say, I hope to have some good commentary about the UK elections. And we're going to continue to watch the end of Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden. Because, as we say in the description, reality has sunk in. A reality is sinking in. And you can only run so long and so far from reality before it captures you and actually knocks you down. And that's the position, ironically, that Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau are in at the same time. One is much older than the other and suffering from dementia, but both of them suffer from a huge case of egomania and narcissism. And I think it's just about over for them both. Thanks for watching, folks. Thank you for watching this episode of Stand on Guard and being a part of the KRAYDEN'S Right channel. If you've watched this episode to this point, you've watched it all. And that's really important for a small station like this. We always say subscribe, hit the bell, be a part of the KRAYDEN resistance. Resolve to resist. That's what we're doing. And if you become a subscriber, if you're a supporter of this station or a member through Substack, through YouTube, and now you can be a local as well, that's so important to us because I couldn't do this without you. I made a decision to become an independent journalist about a year ago because I wanted to bring all of my experience in the military, in journalism, to you. I don't promise anything I can't deliver. I don't offer clickbait. I offer truth. The truth is out there. And it's my job to bring that truth to light and to you. Thanks for being a part of the KRAYDEN'S Right Resistance, and we'll see you again soon.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need a political change, but we also need to resolve